Go ahead and call the meeting to order. The board's all present. Would all who wish rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is agenda adjustments. I don't believe we have any agenda adjustments unless somebody else has a request. All right, we'll go ahead and continue. I would make a motion to adopt the minutes of June 8th as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or corrections? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. I would make a motion to approve payroll warrant 25, regular warrant 25, bond warrant 39, and main purse. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up is public comment. Would anybody like to speak? Going. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll go ahead and move on. Next up is acknowledgements. Jake, you want to go first?
Yeah, I have nothing at this time.
Patrick?
Nothing right now. Thank you.
Mark?
I also have nothing at this time.
I don't really have anything either. I know the students and the teachers are all home and hopefully enjoying themselves. And I know our administrators are still wrapping things up and working hard this summer, and I appreciate that too. Meredith, anything you would add?
Yeah, I would just acknowledge all those individuals who are having to move and be displaced. We're sitting in the middle of the OHS office here in the library. So I want to just thank everyone for their efforts and patience with lots of displacement and construction happening this summer.
And I'll just note that the student rep was not able to make it today, so we won't have any acknowledgements from him. Next up, we're into director reports. Lisa, you want to start?
Sure thing. I'm pleased to report that all of our positions are currently filled as far as special ed staffing. Our teaching positions have been filled. Social worker that we're sharing with RSU 22 was approved by their board, I believe last week or late last week. So we will be working on a contract with them to share that position with, and that's Billy Joe Bowden, who's an LCSW. We also have a 2/5 speech pathologist that's coming on board, and our current speech paths are extremely excited that someone's going to provide some relief on our campus. We've also recently filled 4 of our ed tech positions. Paige Meisterling was hired at the end of the year to fill a position as a short-term sub just to complete the year. But we had enough folks starting, moving on, that we were able to offer Paige a position at ASA. And Maggie Oxier, who will also sub for us all year and did a lot of work in special ed, we were also able to offer her a job at ASA. Robinson St. Tard was working with Bangor Regional Program, and he is coming to us and will be in our program at OMS, in our self-contained program, working with Steve Van Dolman. And Carly Pete is joining us for the summer. She is a teacher. She's looking for a teaching position. I've semi-secured her to stay with us if she isn't able to land that position for the fall. So I'm hoping that she finds a job that she's looking for, but if not, she'd be a great addition for us. And that also is at ASA. As far as summer school goes, we have 74 students from ASA that are participating, 39 from OMS, 27 students at OHS. Out of all these kiddos, 55 have been confirmed and will be participating with RAD Camp. Some of them have already started that. We have 41 staff members involved in the coordination and delivery of services. I've been amazed to hear what people are putting together in each school. As tired as our folks are, the creative juices are just flowing, and I've been super impressed with how all in our folks have been. So I'm pretty excited to see it get started next week. Those staff members are from drivers to cafeteria or lunch workers, and then ed techs and so, just the support staff we're going to need, the teachers that are also going to be working. So I'm looking forward to seeing it in action. It's definitely been something that's been put together at a very rapid rate with a lot of people, we basically met virtually to pull this together, and I'm just super pleased with how it's coming together. Any questions?
Any questions? Great, thank you. Next up, Meredith with the curriculum coordinator report.
Hey, everybody. So as Lisa pointed out, the summer program with respect to RAD Camp enrollment is up and running, and folks are getting ready to welcome kids to campus next week. And it really has been a tremendous lift that wouldn't have happened without the dedication and commitment of so many people. And I would just like to acknowledge that, this really was a circumstance of folks rising to the challenge. Our kids needed to rise them to our kids needed them to rise to meet, and they are doing so, and I'm so grateful. With things kind of calming down and folks having begun summer, the pivot is definitely to thinking about the fall and what that will bring for us. One element of that I'm really excited about is our upcoming equity audit with the Equity Alliance folks in Minnesota. And at the same time, I think that it's important to acknowledge that the audit itself is not going to supplant the good work that we have been doing in district this year and that we will continue to do alongside that audit. So two pieces of that I would like to highlight. One, Shauna engaged in a book study about a book called Grading for Equity through the DOE this year, and she found it profoundly impactful for its role in challenging what are really long-standing and sometimes unexamined beliefs about grading, and the invitation to consider the impact that grading can have on students is one that she embraced and thought others may want to as well. So we are planning for an optional district-wide book study of Grading for Equity, what it is, why it matters, and how it can transform schools and classrooms next year. And that plan was affirmed by feedback from some folks in thinking about next year who requested that we offer additional book studies. And so alongside that, the anti-racism and equity and education team has begun assembling a library, a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional library for educators here in district. And we have stacked that so far with 27 different titles in sets of 4, there are sets of 12, and those will be available for folks in district to use to run their own independent book studies if they choose, to guide and fuel their own inquiry, or to use as a resource for our educator data inquiry project element of supervision and evaluation system, which is a recent addition to that process. So I'm excited about that as a resource that really empowers folks to use it in a way that is best for them as opposed to being prescriptive. Another project that's been in the works is the development of our FY22 ESSA grant application. And so to begin that, I surveyed district-wide faculty and invited input about where they which areas of either curriculum, instruction, assessment, or professional development they would like to see supported next year. And then based on that feedback, I developed a draft of the application that you'll be seeing later this evening. But in there, I think is a reflection both of a district-wide investment in some of the initiatives that we have begun this year, like the Wabanaki Studies Work Group, alongside responsiveness to student needs returning from the pandemic, like a deep dive into our math curriculum K-8, and then other elements to help us be prepared for opportunities as they arise, like support for new teachers, and then content-specific support for folks. And with that, I will conclude my report this evening, unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions? Not seeing any. We can move on to superintendent report.
Good evening, everyone. So in the board folder, Mike Archer has provided in his typical fashion the spring sports report. So if you have a chance to review that, it certainly outlines a successful season and summarizes spring, but also has some just final reflections from Mike, which we appreciate. And we also just appreciate his work over the year to lead our high school athletics, and also, certainly providing support down to middle school as well, as we try to coordinate efforts and help to make sure there's continuity between those programs. So thank you to Mike for that information and report. I wanted to share some information that was shared with me at the end of the school year about our core program. Cammie, Carter, and Don Hawley, as you know, are the teachers in that program. This year, we expanded their capacity by adding an ed tech in the core program, which allowed us to expand our enrollment there considerably, and it was well utilized this year. But some summary data that she shared, over the past 5 years, we've graduated a total of 51 students from core with a 96% graduation rate. And when you consider the whole purpose of core is to engage students who need something different than the traditional school environment to stay on track and moving forward toward graduation, a 96% success rate is phenomenal. And so, I think it shows the success of the model that we have, and the fact that we've expanded it to make that successful model available to more, I think is doing good things for our students. This particular year, core had 20% of the graduating class, so right around, I think, 13, 14 students in this year's graduating class. And this year, a total of 9% of the high school total enrollment was enrolled in core, which equates to right around 33 students at some point over the course of the year were enrolled in core. And this year we had an increased number of students who had either IEPs or 504 plans, and that was part of the reason we wanted to put some ed tech support there to be able to provide more of those services to make that program more accessible to students who had those kinds of learning needs. So I think, I'm really appreciative of Cammie of putting this together and sharing it with us. And I thought that would, be data that you're interested in hearing as well. Do you have any questions about that? Sam, did I get any of that wrong as I was translating statistics into numbers? Because she had statistics and I was trying to give a sense of numbers. Does that sound all right to you?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So we plan to continue the ed tech in the core program next year. We're continuing to pay for that particular position with ESSER funds, at least for next year. And I think next year we need to begin to talk about, some of these positions like that as to whether or not we want to move that back into the regular school budget if we feel like it's something we need to sustain. But that's where that particular position was paid for from this year, and we have plans to do that next year. Also on my radar and Brian's radar is thinking about board meetings in August. We got some clarity from MSMA about, with the emergency order sunsetting on June 30, the remote meetings and board member remote participation and public remote participation in board meetings were all covered and allowed for under the emergency order. And so with that sunsetting, we were told that July 30 is when all of those provisions go away for allowing for the remote participation. And so Brian and I just asked about, there were several bills in moving through the legislature, and we asked about the status of those, and we learned that one was passed that allows for districts to continue to have remote participation in board meetings with certain parameters in place that have to be put into policy. So I'm going to ask maybe Brian, if you want to explain a little bit more of your thinking on how we might move forward with that and what options exist.
So, I mean, the two main things we lose are board members being able to vote remotely. We've had board members that participate remotely, but they're not allowed to vote by law. So that's been a legal limit. The other legal limit has been, we've always been able to broadcast, and that doesn't go away, but having people be able to public comment via Zoom or other remote functions. Those are the two things that we lose. So the first one, I think we would all like to fix, but I don't know that that's an emergency. The second one, I think is going to be a really abrupt shift for the public, that you have to show up in person if you want to make a public comment. So to implement this, I think the bill's at the governor's desk, but presumably it's going to get signed. It was passed as emergency legislation, which means it had a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate. Basically, what we have to do is have a policy that we pass that just spells out all the details of, the policy is required to place limits on board members participating remotely. It's supposed to be based on if they're out of town or a couple of other extenuating circumstances. So it's not meant to be a full transition to remote. It's for the board members, it's supposed to be, really covering that kind of out of town or maybe sick or something case. But for the public, the other thing the policy just has to do is spell out exactly how people can participate, and then it has to be notified on a agenda, which we're already pretty good at. But I don't think the policy is that hard. But the key point is, the law requires a policy. So there's just a question. We could rush it through. We could have a policy committee meeting. We could, we're talking about having a meeting to talk about COVID in July. We could bring that policy forward in July and waive our 2-week rule and have it passed. So it's really right in place on August, whatever our first meeting, August 10th, 11th, our first meeting in August. Or we could just treat it like a normal policy and have a meeting in August and a meeting in September, take 2 votes, and it's not in place until the end of September, beginning of October. And I don't have a super strong opinion, although I kind of think the public might find that disappointing to lose that option for 2 months. So I just wanted to get the board's feedback on how we, on the other hand, having a policy on open meeting access that's rushed through is not the best thing either. So get the board's feedback on how we should tackle meeting that new approach.
Question, moving back to the beginning, you said July 1st, but I'm sorry, July 30, but you meant June 30, correct?
There's a 30-day sunset. So the emergency is over July 30th, June 30th, and we can carry this practice as usual for 30 more days.
I mean, I would fully support doing the more expedited process, just because I wouldn't want the public to lose the ability to comment through Zoom. I think that's really wonderful, and I think having 2 months without that would be less than desirable, in my opinion.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, one of the complicating factors is how to run a meeting in person and have remote participation, and us not having to all stare at computers. And so in thinking about whether or not we move back to the town council chambers, I think Brian initiated some contact with them about just the technology there, and we think it needs to be upgraded for it to work properly for this. And you know, just engaging with them about that. I frankly think that broadcasting, recording, having interactions through Zoom is better than what we were doing before with equipment that was kind of glitchy. And I think everyone's become accustomed to, let me find the Zoom link and I can turn it on and listen to it and participate that way. So I think that issue has to be explored a little bit in terms of where we do it. But the way we did the annual budget meeting, you know, I think holds some promise, except that we didn't have two-way communication with everyone hearing if there were audience or remote feedback from the remote audience in that room. So I'm going to meet with Jason later this week to talk to him about his ideas on that. So that's just another nuance of figuring this out. But I think first, just hearing from the board about what the board wants to do, and then we can work to see how we can make it work.
No, so I heard one push for doing it on the expedited path, which is, I guess, my proclivity too. So unless I hear opinions otherwise, that's probably what I would do going forward. Okay, and yeah, like Meredith said, there's a technology problem. Town council's going down the same path. So they're buying new equipment. I was at a meeting briefly the other day and they had an owl. Just literally looks like an owl. It's about this big and it's an omnidirectional camera and microphone. It had a technology failure the night I was there. So there's definitely kinks to work out, but there's a technology thing on the side. Even if we go at our own, I think it's a couple $1,000s. It's not cheap, but it's not insurmountable to get to the technology. But all right, so I'll go ahead and push the policy process forward so that we can maybe take a vote in July.
Yep. Sounds good. Everything else that I had to report is later on the agenda. So I'll just stop there.
Okay, any other questions on superintendent report?
Okay, so moving to discussion. To begin with, I wanted to just share a little bit about the end of the state of civil emergency document. I share this with the board. It's in the board materials. The significance of that for schools is that's the trigger for the school health guidance and requirements to be no longer requirements. And so the document came out on a Friday, which was 2 days after we had received another set of new guidance that we had been waiting on. And so this, you know, kind of as has been the case all along, you know, trumped all that other guidance that was out a couple of days prior. So just to summarize, basically, as this says in the first paragraph, the state's last remaining face covering requirement, which only applies to indoor pre-K through 12 schools and childcare settings, will also end on June 30. And the other element that we still had in place following the health and safety requirements that is also removed is the social distancing requirement that was under the health and safety measures that required the minimum of 3 feet. So that's also been removed. you know, that's the kind of big overarching change that this provides. Or the, you know, this new move really changes the context for us to consider how we move forward in RSU 26. So as I said, when I emailed you back, when this came out, the leadership team met and considered where we were, what this said, you know, kind of looking at what's happening this summer to work to put together some new guidelines for our work this summer that can carry us through until we convene our committee and consider what fall looks like. And just knowing, you know, trying not to get ahead of myself, because as this shows, things can change, you know, very quickly. So just trying to consider, how do we establish guidelines for this summer? And I think, you know, we're all seeing as we're out in public that there's definitely a change. I mean, you know, the norm in our public and community, and when you go to the grocery store and everywhere, I have seen that shift. And so, you know, I feel that given new guidance that we have always, through this process, I think, use that guidance to help inform what we're doing, and have tried to, personally, I have felt that it's been an important anchor for us as we move forward throughout the entire school year, that staying with the state guidance has been, I think, proven to be a very useful frame to have, and one that really served us well. And I think it was also something that helped our community know what to expect from us, right? That we weren't kind of going off script, doing things in a way that was unexpected compared to what the state was guiding schools to do. And I continue to think that that feels like the right way forward. So in response to that, you have in the packet the summer guidelines. So I shared this with the board. I shared it with our summer programming staff of you know, any role. So from the people who are going to be working here in the offices, the custodial employees, the summer food program employees, the summer school employees, to just solicit feedback on this. And I got some good questions, and some helpful questions that added some clarifications to what we had initially shared. And we tried to put together guidance that was extremely short and to the point, so that, you know, it was easily understood. And I think for some, because it was so short and to the point, some felt like, what, you know, am I missing something? How are we going to do this or that? And it really is, we think, all captured right here. So I just want to kind of go through this, and as a follow-up to the state end of the civil emergency, and then maybe talk about those two together. So you see the guidelines that we're recommending continue to require masks indoors for 11 and under. And in the guidelines, that follows the recommendation that the state is putting out. They continue to strongly recommend, but not require, that unvaccinated people, including those under 12 years of age who are not eligible for a COVID vaccine, wear face coverings indoors. So we've made this differentiation between those age groups who've had the opportunity to be vaccinated and those who have not. So for 11 and under indoors, we're recommending that we continue to require masks indoors, and that for those 12 and older, that masks are recommended for those unvaccinated. Secondly, that outdoors, we would be eliminating any mask requirement or social distancing requirement. And that follows the guidelines as well.
I'm sorry, is that for all age groups?
Yes.
There's no, okay.
And last, under that requirement section, that indoors, there are no social distancing requirements except for 11 and under when eating. And that actually, that should be a separate line. Sorry, that daily symptom screening is the last element of the guideline, should continue to be completed. I think that's a good practice. We need to just continue in perpetuity. And I don't think we can, I don't think we need to drop that for sure. And so some additional clarifications we made, that outdoor learning would be promoted and considered when programming, weather, and staffing permit. I think there is maybe a question that's lingering in people's minds. Will parents expect that we're just going to be outdoors because that's where their students can be unmasked? And I think, certainly we'll be outdoors as much as we're able to, and it makes sense with what they're trying to accomplish and what staffing and weather allow. And so we wanted to add that clarification, and a transportation clarification was important to add. And so we're reducing the spacing requirement to say that we'll make sure there's the option of sitting one student per seat for those who choose to have distance from others. There really, the busing requirements all along were quite gooey and didn't have a lot of structure to them. And we kind of set our own there that was actually a little more restrictive than most. And so this allows those who feel like they want or need to have space to be able to do so by sitting in a seat by themselves, but not required for everyone. And continuing to make sure the practice that we've asked SEER to make sure is happening, of making sure the windows are open in front and back. And that's part of the good ventilation that can prevent transmission on buses. So that's the guidance that we're putting forward to you. And I would ask that this be put into effect immediately. We have summer programming that starts next Tuesday, 29th. And I wouldn't want to start on the 29th and then change to something else on the 1st. I think we just need to communicate and say, this is how we're going to operate our summer programming. So that's what I'm asking you to approve tonight. I'll just pause there.
I support this, but can I just ask a clarifying question? Sometimes you have to be a lawyer to follow these guidelines, but my read of it is that, so there's a framework which was updated on June 9th. And then there was the declaration that said the framework is a recommendation, but not a requirement. And the framework still has masks indoors. So technically there's a recommendation for mask indoors, but not a requirement for mask indoors. Admittedly, this is complicated. Am I parsing that correctly?
I guess I read the second paragraph to kind of be a strong statement about where they are on masks. Right? They're making a pretty clear clarification there.
My understanding from reading it is that they strongly recommend it, but it's not required. I don't know if that answers your question, Brian.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like we're going beyond what this is saying, in that we're saying we're going to require it for that age group that's not eligible for vaccination. And this is saying that they just simply recommend it for anyone unvaccinated, including those 12 and under. I see what you're saying, that the next paragraph down says that the safety measures are recommendations. But, I guess the paragraph about masking seems pretty clear as to what they're saying.
When I read this, the way I read the document as a whole was that individual school districts can choose what their policies are, and that they're still strongly recommending that unvaccinated people wear masks indoors. And if we choose as a school district, we can make that our policy. That they're basically recommending but that they're recommending to school districts that we continue the current policy. or continue the policy that unvaccinated people wear masks indoors. So I think my question would be why we would, if it's strongly recommended for unvaccinated people to wear masks indoors, are we eliminating? I guess my question is, why aren't we requiring masks for unvaccinated people? If our policy is to require masks for people under the age of 12, why aren't we requiring masks for all unvaccinated people indoors?
I mean, the rub is that the science behind masks for people who are unvaccinated and not for people who are vaccinated is very strong. But the policy framework and the enforcement framework for that is just, there's just no help on how that actually works in the real world. We don't have vaccine cards that people are showing or passports. Some countries are going down that. That's obviously not happening in this country. Although California is starting to talk about it, who knows where this is headed. But for right now, we just don't have any framework for enforcement. So it comes down to putting the burden on individual teachers and getting into a I believe you, I don't believe you kind of argument. And it's really a slippery slope. If I had a wand to wave that could just make this rule enforce itself, I would, but I really have a very hard time seeing how it gets enforced in practice.
I guess I'm a little bit befuddled by that answer, Brian, only because aren't schools the one place in America where we're required to show proof of vaccination? I mean, aside from healthcare providers. So this is something, showing proof of vaccination when you go to school is something we require. I don't see how.
Not for COVID yet.
Right, it is required for required
For
vaccination.
For
But-
FDA approved vaccinations, we do, not for
Well,
non-FDA approved
But
vaccinations.
what I'm asking is, why wouldn't we require people to show their vaccination status and then apply the mask policy? The argument that it's unenforceable, I think, is not a good argument. Because I think it's very enforceable. You just ask people when they're signing up for classes to show their vaccination status. And if that changes, if they get vaccinated, you do that. You can certainly ask that for employees.
Well, I
But I
certainly feel
don't-
like it's setting up ourselves and our staff up for, having this group of kids over here to say, well, the unvaccinated kids have the mask on and, are in this, highly visible place of being unvaccinated. And I think having it as a personal choice and responsibility is in our state, in our communities, that's what's happening everywhere. And I simply don't want to have to put our staff, but also our children in the place of almost kind of singling them out in that way. And I think there will be people who are vaccinated who will continue to wear masks. And I think there will be people who are unvaccinated who will not wear masks. But I think that reflects the society at large. And I feel like we have a strong vaccination rate among the most vulnerable members of our school community, which are the adults, are the people that are present at school every day. And it really doesn't feel right to me to distribute lists to all staff and have them tracking who is vaccinated, who's not. And it almost, feels like, we're branding kids as, in some stigmatizing way. So
Okay.
I feel like that's not the kind of approach that we should be taking.
So I hear that 100%. And although I don't feel as strongly as you do, I agree with it. And I agree that we shouldn't be branding people as, these are the unvaccinated people. So I guess, where I go with this though, is if we feel strongly as a community that we don't want to say, these are the unvaccinated kids, we're keeping lists, then given what we know about the spread of COVID indoors, why aren't we going to just continue to require masks for everyone indoors? So it's a question of which is more important to you, preventing disease spread or stigmatizing people? And if you don't want to stigmatize people, why wouldn't you go towards preventing disease spread and require everyone to wear a mask indoors? Like that's the easy out for if you don't want to separate groups. it seems like, given the choice of wearing masks or not wearing masks, why not pick the safer option if you know you're going to have a mixed group and you don't want to stigmatize people? So I can't get behind the current recommendations for that reason. I agree with not wanting to stigmatize folks. I get that. That's fine with me. I just don't agree with the reaction that says, well, in that case, we're just going to make them optional for everyone.
I will say that I also cannot get behind it, but for probably the opposite reason is Patrick. I'll be honest, I understand that we're following the DOE recommendations or I'm sorry, not the DOE, but the main CDC recommendations, and that we've been doing that all year. But when I read them, I was a little bit disappointed to see that they're going to continue to keep our elementary school kids masks, despite the fact that this is the group that has the least effect on COVID. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we had any COVID at ASA at all this year. This group that does get COVID, they're, if they do happen to get it, it's flu-like symptoms for them in this age group. So, I understand where your recommendation is coming from. I'm not saying I'm disappointed with any, member of the team. I'm just disappointed with the state that they're continuing to push this on the elementary school kids, despite the minimal effects it has on them.
I think it's a big mistake to characterize our experience with the original COVID strain with the potential, given different variants that are available, that are widespread today. Infection rates are different. Effects on children are different now. I think that this is not the time to be less vigilant. Saying that things were fine in fall of last year when there was not the Delta variant, when there was not the Gamma variant, that's just not the case today. Yeah.
So, I go back to really the fact that I feel like this discussion is a good example of the diverse opinions and positions on this that's present all over the place in our own community. And so that's why I feel like anchoring our way forward on the guidance that has really proven to be a good guiding force for us this year continues to make sense. And I know that it's not going to be aligned with what everyone would like to see. But I think that it strikes, some protective factors with the group that, is not eligible for vaccines yet in an elevated way, but reflects also this unraveling that we're moving toward as cases are, on the decline. And, I think for us to have either a much more aggressive, safety structure than what our state is saying seems to be the right place to be right now, and what people experience out in the general public is problematic for enforcement and challenging. And, likewise, I think, keeping kind of a step by step, like last fall, it was the, go slow to go fast. And I think you have to kind of do the same thing with some stepping back, that you have to take steps with that as well. So I guess that is what I would say to both of those kind of opposite comments.
Yeah, you're right. We're never going to make everybody happy. State guidance has been a pretty strong anchor for us. And I just think compromise has been a pretty strong anchor for us as well. And that's personally why I like this plan. I think it's a good balance. I think you have said a phrase that to me is really key: personal responsibility. The 12-year-olds and up, they, or at least their parents, have a choice about vaccines. And, different people have different risk balances. And I'm not the one to take that decision out of their hands. And so, that this policy supports that. Children under 12 don't have a choice. And I know there's quite a few of the kids in our community that would have a vaccine right now if it were available, but it's not. So there's a choice that's not in their hands. So to me, and I think this is probably where the state thinking is coming from too, is there's a very strong element of personal choice, personal responsibility, personal acceptance of consequences. And I know it's not perfect because vaccines are not perfect protection, and there's all kinds of spillover at the edges, but at the core, and it doesn't seem like we're getting to herd immunity, so that argument's not particularly compelling either. So to me, at a core, it's very much based on personal choice, personal responsibility, and it's a compromise scenario. So and I'll just say right now, we have never claimed for this whole thing to be able to see more than 6 to 8 weeks in advance. And, to your thing about the variants, Patrick, that's what I would say is right now, today in Maine, the caseloads are back to summer last year levels. They're down to about 3.5 per 100,000 per day. They're not the lowest they've been, but they're very, very low. And kids are going to be sitting in hot buildings with no air conditioning in the summer. So to the extent we can find a compromise and not take large groups of kids who don't have a choice, I think we should take the mask thing. November, who knows? Personally, I probably come down where you do, Patrick, that by November, we're going to see another spike. It's going to be the Delta variant. And so I don't want anybody to read this that we're guaranteeing that this is the path forward and we can only do this or lower going forward. I think we're going to have to continue to be flexible. I hope I'm completely wrong and that that's not where it goes. But, I look at this as a 6 to 8 week policy. That's all we've ever done. It's summer, the rates are low. And I think it's a compromise. So that's where I end up. Mark, anything you want to add? So you're still muted. Well, not through the speaker. You need to change your speaker on the Zoom, your microphone on Zoom.
While he's doing that, I'll answer a question that was that I just alluded to. We have strong vaccination rates among adults. Our school staff vaccination rate is 88.5. I haven't looked since we got out of school if we've received more data, but our vaccination rate for those eligible students 12 and above was 40%. So that's where the two different rates are. I haven't looked for school specific or summer specific students or staff, but that's our school-wide data.
Sorry, what were the two again?
88.5 for staff, 40% for students 12 and above.
That's really low for the students in terms of looking at disease transmission. The thing about the personal responsibility aspect of this, I feel like that's a bit of a red herring, quite frankly, because there's a really big difference between personal responsibility for something that can affect yourself and your family and personal responsibility for something that can affect others. If we were talking about, participating in sports that are high risk for concussion, okay, I'm not going to tell anyone not to do that. That's a family choice. That's an individual's choice. And as long as they understand the risk of concussion for some of these high impact sports, then that's the decision that family can make. It's a little bit different with secondhand smoke. Someone might be giving themselves cancer, but if they're also putting me at risk, then that is more equivalent to what I'm seeing with COVID. And the decision to allow people not to wear masks when they're not vaccinated and have a much higher chance of transmitting the disease, to me is more like saying it's okay to smoke inside the classroom than saying it's personal responsibility. And if you want to go participate in a risky sport, you can do that. Those are very different things. It crosses a line when you start to affect other people with your personal choices. Then it's not about personal responsibility. It's about protecting the community and having community standards. Am I correct that, let me ask this question. Are we legally required to prohibit smoking on campuses, or is that something that we do by policy?
Legally required.
Okay. And if it were not legally required to prohibit smoking on campuses, would we as a school district still want to prohibit it anyway?
Yes, but
I-
it's not a perfect analogy because I can't get a vaccine against cancer from secondhand smoke. And I understand vaccines are not perfect, but it is a game changer.
Well, and also the vaccinated can wear masks as well. If the vaccine's not perfect, the mask helps.
Okay, I think this is not gonna, we're not changing any minds here. I think everyone knows where I stand on this. I actually have felt all along that the state of Maine standard has not been adequate. I reposted in the chat the current US CDC requirements for masking indoors versus outdoors. And it's currently recommended by the US CDC that outdoors, most people who are unvaccinated in most situations wear masks. So I'll be voting no on these guidelines. If it comes to a vote, I can't support them. And as long as that's in the record, I guess that's all I can do.
Fair enough. We I guess you haven't been talking about this with us for a year, but yeah, it is. I think we've been talking about it for a long time, and certain positions I think are set. But I do want to hear from Mark. We haven't got to hear from Mark yet.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm supportive of the guidelines as presented, recognizing that this just takes us through the rest of the summer and not for fall. I'm hopeful that there will be vaccines available for those under the age of 12. I've seen some dates as early as possibly as September. And I think that as those vaccines become available for younger groups, I think we apply the same policy to them. But I know that's putting the cart before the horse. But for right now, for this summer, I'm supportive of the guidelines as presented.
All right, Meredith, did you want to vote, or we've sometimes done this by vote and sometimes just by administration hearing board opinion?
Well, I think, I mean, I would say we need to figure out if we have a strong enough consensus to move forward, because I'm hearing two say, yes, I'm supportive of these, and two say I'm not, but for completely opposite reasons. So
Right.
I feel like that's about clear as mud. But, you know, I think if I'm listening, I think that these fall in the middle of the two who, you know, disagree for opposite reasons, with kind of where I think you and Mark are supportive of, Brian. So I guess I would ask the board, are you comfortable with me moving forward given the discussion we just had?
I'm
Jake, could you live with these for summer or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, if you need us to, you know, obviously this is the problem with a 4-member board, but if you need us to put a vote on record so that you can move forward with these, you know, the caveat for me is that we're going to, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to try to have as many classes for these 11-year-old and under kids outdoors as we can so that they don't have to be masked.
Well, I think we're going to try to, but I think the expectation that parents have for that should be tempered with, that's not something we can do for the entire programming. So I think that's why we put that in there, so there wouldn't be this expectation set that that's what we're going to do to work around for 11 and under. Because with some of our highest need students, that being outdoors and, you know, temperature regulation, that's challenging. So I think there are limits to what we can do outdoors during summer to, you know, alleviate the mask issue for 11 and under.
So is your preference from this board to give you a vote on this? Is that your preference?
Well, I think just hearing that the board, you know, is understanding we need to move forward in some way, and absent this, you know, then I think we would leave what we have in place, which doesn't feel right to me. So I think what I'm hearing from you, Jake, is that, you know, if we need to move forward with something that, you know, you can see that this is something that, you know, I guess you could live with. I don't want to put words into your mouth.
No, to answer Mark's question directly, I can support this in the short term if you need an official vote on it.
Well, I don't think we have to vote. I just think I needed to hear some consensus if we're not going to vote. So I think I have a strong enough sense for there's enough of momentum to put this into place without having to take a vote if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line is this is the version that would get the most votes, but with a 4-person board and people on opposite sides, we may or may not. I mean, maybe if Jake is gracious, we'll get to a majority, but might be best to just leave it as what you heard as the consensus. And I haven't heard anybody say that, you know, that they think the administration should stop moving forward. So far, I haven't heard that.
Yep. Okay. That's what I needed. So for fall planning, I've spoken the last couple of meetings about our process for fall, and you know, tonight my goal is to have us determine board representatives to the stakeholder committee, and also just want to tell you about who else I'm planning to have on the committee. I'm seeking a representative from our school health community. So, you know, I'm soliciting from a couple of people to fill that role. And then 3 staff members. OEA is going to get us a rep from each building. I'm going to solicit a student representative, a high school student representative, and then the members of our leadership team. And really hoping to leave it there, because I'm trying to have a smaller group that's a little more manageable to schedule this meeting and to work on, you know, to be a working group rather than just kind of a feedback loop. And so getting to that, we would be up at 13 just with those individuals. So that's the composition and size of group that I'm looking for. And really it would be that group would be helping to put together the, you know, the whatever this is for fall. You know, I certainly hope we have a little more to, you know, to guide the work by that time. And, you know, my goal is that we will be able to have a meeting by around the 14th, that 14th of July, and then to have a meeting that next week that's either a board workshop, or we may need to have it be a regular meeting because we might need to do some hiring and we might need to do some policy work, but to hopefully schedule a summer board workshop or board meeting to talk about this in public. So I think, you know, 2 steps here: identify board reps and to firm up a summer meeting date. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay, so as far as board reps, well, I'll just cut to the chase. I've already had 2 people contact me that they're interested. Jake and Mark have expressed an interest. I'm interested. I'm just going to guess you're probably interested as well, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question here would be, is it wise to have a board rep in this case when we've got such divergent views on this matter on the board?
Well, I think in the constitution of the committee, the board reps are also representing the community,
Yeah,
which has divergent views. So that's actually kind of where I was heading. Well, first off, is it still true that everybody, assuming that we decide it's appropriate to have a board rep, is everybody wanting to be one of the board reps? And is everybody still able to make those dates, somewhere around the 14th and somewhere around the 20th?
Yes.
Okay. Meredith and I talked about it. I don't think it's a great idea to have the entire board go there just because it would dominate. So one thought I had, I mean, ultimately, I just pulled up the policy. Ultimately, the goal is to make appointments by consensus if possible. If not, the board chair has final say on appointment. I'd obviously rather not get to that point. One thought I have is we appoint somebody, I don't want to create sides where there aren't sides, but there kind of are obviously sides. We appoint 2 diverse opinions from the board, and I just attend in the ex officio role, which attaches to the chair for every committee. That's one option. I'm open to hearing other options.
Can I ask a quick question? What does that do with majority of the board being present?
It's a public
Meeting.
it's a public meeting already, so
Well, we didn't make them necessarily publicly advertised before because we had 2 board members, but if we had 3, even with Brian attending ex officio, we would advertise it.
Yeah, because we have a quorum.
Yeah.
You know, I'll just be blunt. My preference would be for Brian to be on there as board chair and then for Jake and I to be on there. That's just my preference.
You know, I think that I'm going to put something forward, and Brian, I don't mean to put this all on you, but if Jake and Mark could get behind this, that Brian, I'd have you be the only member to attend and make it one board member. If we're going to try and keep it small, I think there'd probably be a less rancorous process that way.
Patrick, I will say that if I will take that one step further, if we're okay with Mark and Brian doing it and you and I stepping back, I'd be okay with that personally.
I mean, first of all, I just want to say that as people, I personally respect everyone here. But because our views have been so different when it comes to COVID, you know, I think right now, Jake, you and I seem to be the most divergent with this. Mark, I very strongly disagreed with a lot of your voting record on COVID, so I couldn't get behind Jake's proposal right now.
So that leaves a
Okay.
couple options. Either Brian appoints, or we go through a nomination and voting process, I guess, right?
We could do that. Technically, the voting's not even in the policy. It just says consensus, but I
Yeah.
suppose voting could involve consensus.
If that's the route we're going to go, I'd make a motion for Mark Brewer to represent us on the committee.
Let's hold on. I'm not sure. Motion noted, but I'm not sure if that's the route we want to go. In particular, I think, yeah, I'd probably, well, let me just pull up the board policy again. When in doubt, refer to the board.
mean,
Refer to the,
Just while you're looking at that, Brian, my preference would also be that the stakeholder committee would include more health professionals than we currently have on it. You know, I think putting out a request for community members who are physicians would be very helpful. And it would be nice to have people who have been working with COVID for the past year as a part of this, rather than only people who have been working with education.
I mean, the one thing I will say is that this is not the decision-making process, right? The decision-making process is what comes to the board on the 20th or whenever that meeting gets scheduled. This is a recommendation to the board. That's the only way committees can function.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is, you know, if whoever's the reps to this board, obviously should show up and express their opinions, but the goal of this is to have a balance across all the stakeholders. So I don't envision this as being the place where the board discusses ad nauseum to come to a decision. This is the place where the board expresses their opinion, listens to a bunch of other opinions, and then that bunch of other opinions all gets represented forward to the board at the following week. I don't know if that changes anybody's perspective. You probably already know that, but let's see. The board chair is responsible for appointing members to a standing committee from among the membership of the board. This can be accomplished through soliciting volunteers, reaching a consensus through board discussion, or by direct appointment by the chair. The board prefers a voluntary and consensus-based approach to committee formation. Further down, the board chair and superintendent should be ex officio non-voting members. This is not a voting committee, so that part's not relevant. But of all standing committees, the board chair may alternately serve as a regular member if appointed according to the terms of this policy, not exceeding 2 voting members on the committee. So any other ideas? I'd still like the consensus approach if it's possible. I would not like to be the one who picks, but I'm also not sure. I don't know. I'm personally not in favor of voting, but I guess if that's where the majority of the committee wants to go, we could.
I'd say I'm not in favor of voting either.
I don't know that voting is really even an option. I mean, I suppose it's an option, but it's not the way that we normally do it. Normally we get volunteers. We've got all 4 members want to be on here. I would certainly still like to be on the committee. That being said, I think I could live with the option of Brian being the sole board member on the committee. I will not vote in favor of Patrick on this committee in any way, shape, or form. So I'll just put that out there as well. But if I could live with Brian being the only board member.
I guess, Patrick, you said you're okay with that. Are you okay with that, Jake?
Yep, I can.
Okay. Not my general preference, but it may be the best solution here. So it sounds like we made the committee smaller, so that's good news.
Like we made a consensus motion too.
Yep.
So
Okay.
in looking at the date, July 20th, does that work for everyone to plan? I think we should just plan for a meeting because I have a feeling we're gonna be doing we might be doing some hiring. If not, we can always move it back to a workshop if we decide.
Is that a Tuesday?
It is,
It is.
So 6 o'clock, Tuesday, the 20th board meeting.
yes. But, you know,
That
we
works
can be
for me.
flexible, so if
Without
another night works
without
better.
my antiquated paper calendar in front of me, I can't say for sure, but I think it should work.
Okay. And sorry, Patrick, did you say yes?
Yes, and we'll still be able to participate remotely at that point. Is that correct? If needed,
Right.
until July 30th. So that should
Right,
be
that
fine.
allowance goes
Yeah.
through July 30th.
Then that works for me, the 20th.
Okay, we'll plan for that.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So next we have the ESSA plan. Meredith mentioned that in her board report, and typically at this meeting every year we present publicly the kind of general plan that we have for moving forward our ESSA, which stands for the Elementary Secondary Education Act, which is the funding or the federal law under which special programs like Title I, which serves students who need learning supports, and Title II, which is teacher quality and professional development, Title IV, which it has a myriad of potential uses, Title V that we don't qualify for, which is for rural schools, and some others that we don't qualify for. So a requirement of these grants under which we receive funds, or through which we receive funds, is to share publicly how you plan to use these funds prior to application, so there can be some public knowledge and input. So we use this meeting time to share that and see if there's public input. So I turn it over to Meredith now to kind of walk through a little bit more about the plan and see if anyone has feedback. So Meredith.
Thank you. So as a general frame, our Title I allocations in district are pretty consistent year after year. We have designated this funding as the primary source for our Title I ed tech support. So in keeping with that, the majority of these funds we are suggesting go to fund those 3 positions. In addition to that, our reading recovery program requires an annual subscription of $2,000 that involves mentoring and ongoing professional support. So we have put that membership into this grant alongside approximately $2,500 for professional development books and supplies to support expansion of our Title I program. We anticipate that our need for Title I services is going to be increased in next year because of the circumstances of the pandemic, and meeting those needs will be something we aim to do both with these funds and with ESSER funds that Meredith is planning to seek to support that as well. We have a required set aside project for McKinney-Vento in the amount of $500. That's a set aside that we need to do each year. And then we have indicated $4,542 for the ESSA coordinator, which is the allowable percentage for an ESSA coordinator under grant rules. So that brings us to a total for Title I with a combination of this year's award, our carryover, and then $4,863 from Title IV to a total Title I budget of $132,855.40. So before I move on to Title II, do folks have any questions about Title I?
I'll just say for clarity that Title IV over the years has changed its purpose, and it changed several years ago to something that we all thought, wow, this is going to be really great. It seems more flexible. Well, it turned out to kind of be a nightmare with do's and don'ts and things you could and couldn't buy under projects that, you know, sounded really like valuable and good for us. And so since we kind of, you know, had that really negative experience trying to move forward projects under Title IV, we've just decided to divert those funds to the other titles to be able to just, you know, fully fund those other two titles in the way that we can support the programs we're trying to do with those. So that's just a little bit of explanation about Title IV.
Thank you.
I had one question. $500 doesn't seem like a lot to address McKinney-Vento needs. Have we traditionally, you know, used up that money? Is that money adequate? Are there other sources for McKinney-Vento?
So I talked with Sam about this, and she said that typically that allocation goes to transportation, that is a need that we often need to meet with that. My understanding is that no students' needs have gone unmet, and that if there have been moments of needing to draw down from other sources to meet those needs, and we have done that. Sam, I don't know if you want to speak in any more detail.
Yeah, the highest need we've had to use that money for has been transportation when they've been way out of district. But we try to be creative with that, with using the bus transportation system within the greater Bangor area that helps particularly high school age students that are McKinney-Vento eligible. And we also have been able to utilize our sending school transportations to help with that. And now we also do have our own vans, but that's not something would be a long-term solution, but could be for a temporary solution to get kids to school. Other places we've used those funds have been for some students who have wanted to participate in extracurricular activities where, you know, certain purchases of, I don't know, costumes or, you know, a team jacket or something has been out of their reach. But otherwise, we have a lot of resources that within our community that help all of our students that I've been able to tap into to help our McKinney-Vento students as well, with either school supplies and or Christmas gifts, holiday gifts, food, such things like that. So really, those are the two areas that I've had to utilize that for in the past.
Okay, no need to over budget, but yeah, I would hate to see that. Not talking a lot of money here, so I would hate to see us ever go short. Sounds like we're not, so. Any other comments?
Okay. So Title II, as a frame, is intended to support growth of our educational professionals, our teachers, administrators, in ways that help us serve students better. And so that is the framework for approaching this application. So this year's allocation was $37,152. We have just over $7,000 in carryover. And then, in keeping with Meredith's explanation about Title IV, we're proposing a transfer of $6,392 to Title II from Title IV, giving us an overall budget of $50,630. The first line is for membership to the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association. This is the association that involves curricular leaders from across the state meeting weekly. It has been indispensable to us in meeting the challenges of the pandemic in this district. And they have restructured their membership in a way that makes it much less expensive than it was last year. So that's going to be a bargain for us. The $5,000 for prep assessment, that's our annual membership to the prep network that meets monthly, that provides the March PD Day along with a host of other networking opportunities. And that is a required subscription for membership in that network. We have talked a lot about ways to support our district-wide ability to meet the needs of high achieving students, because as you are well aware, we have a limitation on students who can be identified for Chapter 104, and we have a high percentage of students who in other districts would fall into district normed ranges for identification, but because of the achievements of students in this district do not. And we're exploring ways to better meet those students' needs. So we are looking at contracting with Ruth Lyons, who is an Orno resident and who has a PhD in gifted and talented education. And we are looking specifically for this line at her conducting PD for our K-8 staff for strategies for identifying truly gifted students, which is, there's a lot of nuance between a gifted student and a high achieving student, and developing an instinct for that nuance is something that we think will be useful to teachers, in addition to offering help with differentiation upward in the classroom so that teachers are better equipped to meet the needs of those students who have not been identified. We have our Wabanaki Studies work group that is engaged in ongoing work intended to help us meet the expectation of LD 291 and offer a comprehensive district-wide Wabanaki Studies program in grades K through 12. So we are allocating $3,500 to support that work this year, which will likely involve a portion of that going to materials for teachers and professional development opportunities. In the feedback I received from faculty, math is an area of focus for next year. At OMS, there's going to be a need to replace existing curriculum because of the discontinuing of access to our online version of the textbook that we use now. And we anticipate that we're going to be working this year to identify what that replacement is going to be, but we anticipate that will involve a need for training for teachers to make that transition. Teachers at ASA have identified a desire to have a closer look at the everyday math curriculum there. And so I have allocated $2,500 to support that work. That doesn't mean that everybody wants to get rid of everyday math. It just means that this is an area around which teachers want to think, which to me seems really well timed given our indications from our NWEA testing data about the disconnect between reading achievement and math achievement. I've heard from teachers that some teachers are eager to get back to content-specific PD opportunities. So I set aside a portion for that. Also proposing support for new teachers. And we are talking in prep about ways to support new teachers regionally. And I am thinking that it may behoove us to offer content-specific opportunities for teachers here in district. As you know from our discussions about the tech committee, we are looking at ways to raise the bar of our capacity for utilization of Google Classroom and some of the tools that we have been using in a way that is a manifestation of truly best practice for tech integration. This year, we employed a district provided model for that, where we identified experts in district and then compensated them for the time it took to prepare the presentations for folks. There's an allocation for that. And then finally, there is an allocation to support the potential of a co-principal model at Orono High School. That combined with the allocation for the curriculum coordinator salary of $30,000 and the 4% allowed $1,486 for ESSA coordinator brings us to a total for Title II of $50,630. Any questions?
All sounds really good.
Thanks.
So as I understand it, this is also a public hearing. Is that correct? Should I open the floor to public comment for a minute on this?
Yeah, that would be good if there is any questions or feedback on this. Thank you for,
Would anybody in the audience have feedback or comments on the proposed plan? I know many of you already had input, so sounds like there's no additional comments. All right, unless the board's got a last shot. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have class size projections.
yeah, so as outlined in policy, and it really coincides with the discussion we need to have a little further down the agenda, we are asked to bring class size projections to the board in June to give you a look at where things stand. And so I included a handout in the folder today showing you this information. So I just wanted to, share, just talk through that a little and then circle back up to the one piece that I think we need to really maybe talk a little further about. You can see where current enrollment stands at ASA, OMS, and OHS in the current enrollment column. I think that we always see coming and going during the summer. So I do expect this will change from grade to grade. Whether we gain more than we lose is yet to be seen. But looking at our class sizes now at both ASA and OMS, they are really well, aligned with where I think our targets are for class sizes, except for we need to talk a little bit about K and where we're headed with that group. But the pre-K enrollment is it's quite low. We expect that will grow more. It typically does over the summer. And so that has quite a bit of capacity still. Our capacity for that is 32 total because we have 2 sessions of 16 each that we can provide the morning and afternoon. So that has a lot of capacity. And then just, looking at those 2 other grades where we have something other than the norm, where second grade has the 4-teacher configuration, and that grade has actually grown some over this school year. So they're up at 57, and you see their class size. Back in K, I think they hovered 51, 52 throughout that year. So they've grown some over the last couple of years. And then that 4th grade group next year that's just coming out of 3rd grade, where we had 2 teachers. Now in 4th grade, we're planning to carry that 2-teacher configuration through as long as the class size stays, at that manageable number. So I think in everywhere except K, we're really in a good place with our class sizes. For OMS, similarly, I think we have a good staffing configuration there. As you know, we reduced by by a special ed teacher at that level this year, just, in response really to kind of a bubble that had left the middle school and this overall enrollment shift down. So I think staffing wise, they're in a good place for the numbers they have. You can see, where things aren't always perfectly even are in the math groupings, just depending on how that shakes out. So that's why I added that information there that Richard provided, kind of aside from the average class sizes that would be more typical for the ELA, science, social studies, elective classes. At the high school, I did not give you content, subject area, averages at this point. The master schedule is still, we have a master schedule, but there's still some work happening with settling, student schedule conflicts and student holes. And honestly, I ran out of time to even try to do that. And I just feel like right now, giving you a picture of the enrollment is probably a good step in that direction. So toward, in August, we can bring you back and show you where those numbers are when we bring back follow-up data.
Meredith, can I ask you a question about the high
Mhm.
school? Is that 86 for the ninth grade class? Is that below where we were projecting? And if it is, do we think it's going to go up?
Yeah, so I had that same reaction today, and Lynn's on the call, and I didn't get a chance to ask her, but I think it's right aligned with where we thought we would be, because a number of our, several of our middle school students in 8th grade were actually superintendent agreement students, so they turn into tuition students. So that was really built into, I think, Lynn's projections for that. So I think we're at, I think I heard today 26 for tuition right now. And Lynn, what did you have built in? Do you recall? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. 24. Yeah. So as is typical, Lynn has been, kept us in safe ground with those projections. So I was surprised by that low number, but then once I thought through, the middle school finished the year at 61. I can't remember the number of superintendent agreement students, but there were, I don't know, 5 or 6, I think, in that number. So it all, I think, worked out.
Thank you, Lynn.
So circling back up to kindergarten, I put some notes there. Kristen and I talked today. They've been trying to learn a little bit more about the 50 that you see there that, they're reporting to us as current enrollment. So of those 50, we have 42 who've actually turned in their paperwork, which to us means kind of like we put you in the system, you're in Power School, we're planning, for you to be here. And we have another 8 who we circled back to, and everyone's saying, yes, I'm coming. I need to get you the paperwork. So those feel pretty solid, because we haven't, we just don't have paperwork. And so we're trying to, get people to get that to us. But the fact that they have confirmed by phone that they plan to attend is typically, at this point, we're planning on those numbers as well. We have 3 others at this point who've inquired about superintendent agreements for K, whether or not, I had one family talk to me actually a couple months ago, and I told them, I'm not going to approve it at this point. We're on a threshold. I would approve it certainly if we got to a point where we, know one way or the other if we're going to have to add a teacher and have room. But not until probably August would I be able to tell you one way or the other. And I'm not sure if they could get their superintendent's agreements approved on the other end also. I wouldn't really be all that keen on approving a superintendent agreement for a kindergartner unless there are pretty extraordinary circumstances going the other direction. So the bottom line is, this is in one of those really, to me, it's in a bad spot. 50, right? It's right below the threshold we set. 52 is the threshold we said. If we get to 52, that's the 4th teacher, because we're trying to maintain, class size that's no larger than 17 to 1. And so 51 is that 17 threshold. So we're at that just kind of cusp. I'm almost confident that we're going to hit 52, but I can't be sure, right? So Kristen and I talked today, and we feel like we need to watch a little longer before we make a change. Later down the agenda, what I am asking you to do is to approve a new position pending us exceeding the 51 cap. So probably what that means to me is if we hit 51, I'm going to want to do an anticipated vacancy advertisement and go ahead and get that process started, so that we aren't starting from scratch if and when we hit 52. I mean, I think we're going to have a discussion about, if we're at 51, because we'd like to not be at the last minute to make a change there. So it's in that very, frustrating size right now. And so I think, you know, in talking with staff, Kristen, you know, shared that 17 is where everyone is in agreement that it feels like that's the right threshold to set. But we'd like to be able to, if we're going to go to 52, to be able to know that and make that change sooner rather than later. So I'd like to, because we don't, you know, plan on meeting again until July 20th, to have that advanced authorization to take that route. So that's what I bring before you for consideration tonight. But I guess other than that nuance, which we can talk about, I guess, down later in the action agenda, do you have any questions or comments about any of this, including the kindergarten data?
I guess, you know, one question I have, and I just don't know how this would work, but if the number stays at 50 or 51, is there precedent for hiring more teaching staff for like just the kindergarten year and then having a larger class size in first grade? Because it seemed, I mean, I don't know, I would defer to the educational experts, but I would think that if anywhere you wanted the smaller class size, that would be the place.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about this topic, and have a policy on what our process is. And so basically our process is to, in consultation with teachers, establish what the cap is. And so we've set that cap as the 17. And you know, it just gets really tricky when you get in this kind of very close to that and timing. And so that's really the dilemma we find ourselves in. And so, you know, I think if we get to July and we're at 51, I think we have a decision as to whether or not we want to move forward and just assume that something's likely going to change over the course of the year and be ready and prepared for that with 4 classes, or if we want to stay in place and then reconfigure if needed. And you know, that will be the decision that we have to make. But I think if we can, you know, the earlier we advertise, the better the applicant pool is the dilemma. But I just don't feel like we're at a strong enough place to move forward. Like, I would not move forward to recommend to you that we should move forward to hire right now. But I think if we have one more enrollment, that I think that's the point to do an anticipated vacancy advertisement. And then we can decide, do we want to go ahead and move forward since we're right here on the cusp? So I guess that would be what I think follows our policy and what we had laid out before when we, you know, talked this through a year or so ago.
Did this 17 is the cutoff number for kindergarten have strong support from the kindergarten teachers? I guess would be a question, since I wasn't part of that process a year ago.
Well, I think that was the conversation they had recently,
Okay.
because the policy doesn't set those numbers, but asks us to meet and consult with teachers to really determine what's our threshold. If we see that we're maybe potentially going to be at the threshold, we have some consultation to figure out, you know, what that threshold is going to be. And so that's where the 17 came from in recent discussions Kristen had with the K team.
Okay. Yeah, then I would fully support this if this is the proposal that the kindergarten team is also in agreement on.
I mean, the other
What you're
two,
proposing with the 51 anticipated. I'm sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, I thought you were done, sorry. Yeah, I mean, beyond consultation with the teachers, some of the other things that came out on that policy in this conversation we had was exactly as you said, younger grades, smaller class sizes are more important. So some kind of a ramping through the grades, and also cohort equity, so that there's not one cohort that's just always right below the bubble and always got the biggest classes in the whole school. So I think I personally, I'm pretty happy with how this process is working right now. You know, there's an intentionality about looking at it in June, looking at it in August, and policy did not set specific numbers, which a lot of districts do. I think we're too small for that, but so far I feel like the process is working, and I also would support that. I did have one question. A lot of it's not just class size, but level of need of students. And I know in other cases that we mostly learned that after they got to kindergarten, but and probably because, reduced pre-K last year, we probably have even less information, but I'm just curious if there's any reflection on level of need for that coming kindergarten class.
Kristen, I'm going to punt that to you if you could comment on that.
Absolutely. Lisa Earhart has been scheduling Zoom meetings with individual families and is getting a feel for what's out there and what we need to consider. We're feeling really great about, having a good handle on some of these kiddos. And we'll be doing screening right before school starts. So we will be creating the class lists and have an idea of where the kiddos are going to be. But we're also having this initial, okay, here's what's going to be happening. Here are some of our little friends coming in. And the parents have been fantastic with sharing their thoughts. We put out also a form just asking them for overall thoughts and concerns, and parents have been fantastic about filling that out as well. So we're feeling pretty good about that information. So yeah.
So I do think that we have gathered some information, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we do have some, some needs coming in that we've identified that, maybe are on the end of the spectrum of having, more than typical potentially at this point with what we know so far before ever having done our screening. So that information, I think Lisa's been compiling that for Kristen and the team. Should probably be a part of our discussion in July, or the discussion Kristen and I have to bring a recommendation to you in July.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's a valid point, Brian. It's not always just about the numbers, but it's about the composition of the students making up those numbers.
I think the motion comes down under action items, but so that's deferred. But any other comments or questions from the board? Okay. Next up, we have, so we're into hiring. And in particular, the hire of the day is, or situation of the day with a hiring possibility is a principal. And so you want to brief us on that? Well, so, and then I think we're probably going to go into an executive session, but maybe start with a public summary and then we'll go into executive session.
Sure. So the hiring process, or the interview and selection committee and process wrapped up last week. And the outcome of that is that we decided, or based on the feedback, I'm recommending we not move forward with any member of the applicant pool that we had from the search that we just concluded. And there are a couple of, I think, takeaways from that we had as a committee that I think are worthwhile to mention by way of explanation of kind of laying the groundwork for the recommendation I have to bring to you. One consideration that we discussed was re-advertising, and the kind of final, I think, consensus and really where I landed on that as well was that timing right now is difficult to expect a different outcome with a re-advertising process. And that if we wanted to re-advertise, we feel like it would need to be, to wait and do that, mid-year this coming year. That's really, that this is a difficult time under the best of circumstances to attract, candidates who are willing to make a change at this juncture, where usually you have, probably 60-day notice requirements on your administrator contract. And with the time that we're in, it's probably just not very attractive to make a professional change at this juncture. And, I think there's some other things that we might want to consider as we re-advertise to look at how we are both, conducting our search and whether, how broad our net is with our advertisement. And if we want to solicit any other professional services to assist in that. Those were some things the interview committee brought up. Another issue I think we have to look at is compensation to see if, our compensation rate is attracting the right applicant pool for the candidate that we're, expecting to attract in Orono. So those are, I think, all things that have to be considered when we consider a re-advertising. And so I don't think that right now is the time to consider that. And so really that led me to want to consider an interim possibility. And so really the idea was brought forward around a co-principal structure, which was new and novel to me to consider in a school context, but it's not new and novel in, the world around us. One of the things that was really important in moving forward with a recommendation for an interim to me was identifying an internal interim, because I think the pool for interims at large is also small, and I think there's a ramp up period with anyone who's new to our school community, and I don't think that that it would be as beneficial to us to have an external interim coming in to serve in this role during this time, when I think we have maybe better capacity to have a smooth transition and to carry us through this time with an internal structure. But, in thinking about who that is, I think we and certainly I settled on the fact that a co-principal idea seems to be the best solution for this, given that I think the people that I, felt like were equipped and able to do this, I think both had strengths that really point to kind of parts of the job description and strengths and passions, I think, that point to parts of the principal job description, and that together that the team could provide, a really fabulous leadership transition for the school. So the proposal that I'm bringing forward is that we name Sam Runco and Meredith Diamond as co-principals for the upcoming school year. And we would free up part of their current job responsibilities by hiring additional teaching staff that would allow a couple of our teachers to step into part-time teacher on special assignment roles to take on some leadership responsibilities as outlined in the proposal. So having Mike Archer freed up from his teaching responsibility this year to be a support for kind of the student services side of Sam's role with student discipline and student supervision around school, and then to do the same with Shauna Goodall, and that her spare capacity by having someone take over half of her teaching assignment would be dedicated to curriculum leadership to support some of Meredith's responsibilities that need to have someone stepping in to give her time to lend to this new role. And so as we've been really thinking about doing this, we've been learning a lot about how it's done other places. And so in our research, we have come across a couple of examples in Maine where this is happening at Westbrook High School, Deering High School. And they really came into this model in a very similar circumstance where we find ourselves right now and needing to find an interim solution and really not having time, maybe in one case, or in the other case, not being satisfied with the applicant pool. And so deciding to try this out to bridge the leadership need at the school. And I think both of them have actually stuck with this model. but you know, for us, one thing that's been clear from their talking with us about it is that there are two things that are really key to making this work. One is clear delineation of responsibilities, so that there's, you know, good coordination over who to go for what, right? Because that's, I think, the thing that people are going to have the biggest question about. How do I know who to go for if I have a need? So we've seen some really good models for how to lay that out. We've been working on that. I would best describe it as something like a Venn diagram where, you know, one person has a set of responsibilities over here, the other person has a set of responsibilities over here, and then there's some that are shared, which is actually much like the way a principal and assistant principal work. That's how Reg and Sam had structured job responsibilities. There were things that they both did, and then things that they worked on together. So we imagine this working in really the same way. And so we would focus Sam's roles more in the realm of climate and culture, and focus Meredith's leadership realm really in teaching and learning. And those being kind of the guide for how we divide up the roles of the principal. And, you know, I think that the time that we're in and the needs that we see among students and staff, and knowing our families, that this seems to be the best way that I see us moving forward. And I just had some real, I guess, uncertainty as we were moving through the process and with the candidate pool. And when I settled on that this was going to be my recommendation, that uncertainty was eased. And I just felt a real sense of direction that this is the right way forward for us. And I know that, you know, there are probably questions that people have about this, because I've never worked in this model either. I've never been in a school with this model, but I've been in a school with, you know, the leadership model that we've had in place. And there's always, the best circumstances are always ones where you have complementary people working together who are working to support one another in their separate roles, and to be, you know, good feedback mechanisms for one another when you have to talk through things that, you know, maybe are more difficult, tricky nuances. And that's what I see Meredith and Sam being committed to and already doing, actually, as we kind of have been trying to work on the design of this to bring this forward tonight. So I think I've covered everything that we hope to say to kind of lay it out there. So just to be clear, you know, part of this is to ask for authorization to hire those 2 half-time teachers to fill the roles that I talked about for Mike and Shauna's part of their teaching responsibilities, to free them up. That kind of makes everything else work. And in addition to that, another piece we've identified that's not listed on here is we'd like to also contract with Ruth Lyons for a bit more time to help provide additional leadership in Chapter 104 to help that program as well under Meredith's direction, but to have someone also working in an increased capacity rather than just professional development to help us with some of the logistics in that program this year as well. So that's a recommendation I bring forward. And, you know, I think the board, we should go into executive session, but, you know, if there are any questions of clarifying nature that I could answer right now, I'm happy to do so.
Any quick general questions from the board before we go into executive session? I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A, discussion of confidential personnel matters. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. So the board will switch over to the separate link that Meredith read, and we'll come back here, hopefully not too long a period of time.
Yeah, I sent a link in email. Look for the Google Meet link. Yeah, I sent it to both emails, but I wasn't sure which one.
So out of executive session at 8:02, I would make a motion to authorize the appointment of Sam Runco, Meredith Diamond, Shauna Goodall, and Mike Archer as structured and proposed with salary adjustments and with the titles of co-OHS principal for the next academic year. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark,
Nay.
I vote aye, so the motion carries. Okay, next up, we have approve administrator contracts. I'm sorry, what? Oh, co-curricular. Yep, sorry. Just trying to find that in my folder. Co-curriculars, there we go. All right, so for policy, reappointments to positions occur every year for co-curriculars, and we're starting appointments for next year. I would make a motion to approve the slate of co-curriculars as presented. I'll read it in a minute, but as presented for the record, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have student council, Emerson 50%, Clark 50%, senior class advisor Leslie Winchester, junior class advisor Marge Ennis, sophomore class advisor Heather Holmes, freshman class advisor Becky Cash, director of band Jenna Costa, middle school, high school subcaller Becky Cash, yearbook Christy Boyd, literary magazine Katie York, math team Heather Holmes, drama musical Cami Carter, show choir Cami Carter, high school Spanish club Chris Crocker, high school French club Jay Hubbard, humanities collaboration Jim Botiel, jazz band Jenna Costa, outing club Zach Arnold, art club Jessica Barnes, graduation with distinction Jim Botiel, graduation with distinction mentor Jessica Barnes, graduation with distinction mentor Erica Dixon, National Honor Society Shauna Goodall, RTI coordinator Kathy Van Dolman, EdTech recertification OHS Malvina Pangborn, Key Club Gun 50%, Wagstaff 50%, OHS governance Margie Innes, head football coach Bob Sinclair, assistant JV football coach Derek Sinclair, assistant football coach Robinson Saintard, varsity boys soccer Walter Caballero, JV boys soccer Nate Case, varsity girls soccer Sid Dijek, JV girls soccer Leslie Winchester, varsity field hockey Megan Dreyer, JV field hockey Kristen Espling, cross country Lynn White, cross country assistant Matthew Terrell, fall cheering Travis Cole, golf Thomas Hanscom. That is the list. I will say several things that principal candidates noticed. We have a lot of clubs and activities. That's clearly a value in this community. It's right there in our list of student growth and achievement goals, recognizing the whole person of a student. So, but there you have it concretely. It looks like Reg has done a nice job of reappointments before he heads out. So that's a larger slate than usual. But any other comments, questions?
Could I, what is literary magazine?
We didn't have it this year, but it's a publication that's printed and shared. That's student creative writing. That's something we've had in our stipend list for a while, but it's not always filled, and it wasn't filled this year.
And then humanities collaboration?
That's a club, I believe. I need some help with this. A club that is. I don't
Hi,
have it.
Shauna here.
Thank you, Shauna.
The Humanities Collaboration is a link with the University of Maine, I believe, with a professor who's in the philosophy department
Yes.
believe, and there are several seminars, okay, that happen throughout the year, which are led by Jim Boutiel and this professor from the university, which involves community members, high school students, and members of the university community.
And then, I'm sorry, my last question. What's the difference
you, Shauna.
between OH governance and student council?
So governance is teacher certification and the individual that supports that work in the high school with staff, and then student council student.
Any other questions? Those were good questions. I didn't know a couple of those either. Anything else? We'll go ahead and take a vote on appointments to fill stipend positions as presented. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, administrator contracts. Normally this would be easy, but got to think about it in the context of the OHS one we just did. So I would make a motion to authorize the superintendent to extend the contracts of the special services director, ASA principal, OMS principal, curriculum coordinator, as modified by the previous motion for the principal, shared co-principal position. And am I missing anybody? I think those are the ones that come under board purview. Don't stress if you're not on a list, they just aren't appointed by the board. To make a contract that extends from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2023. 2-year extension, well, 1-year extension of sorts to the current contract, but a new 2-year contract with salary increases as recommended by the superintendent. Is there a second?
Second.
So I'm very happy to do all of those extensions. The only thing I would note about salary, because I know people are going to look at those, is many of those salaries need to be taken into the context of 2 years, not 1 year. Teachers and staff all went through last year with no changes to contract, but a number of administrators did forego a salary increase because we thought last year was going to be a terrible budget year. So if you see those numbers, please take them in a 2-year context, not a 1-year context. Also, just as with teacher and staff contracts, they're based in the context of the larger regional competitive salaries, and we aim to offer competitive salaries at every position in the district. So those are contexts for those numbers. Any other comments, questions before we vote? Go ahead and vote. Patrick.
Aye.
I went out of order, didn't I? Sorry. Jake.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Goals. So we had a nice workshop last 2 weeks ago, 1 meeting ago. And I believe this is, at least in spirit, we may want to wordsmith here, but in spirit, what we came up with as goals. So we basically had one goal that's modifying, and you all will notice they're on the agenda, modifying fundamental board responsibilities to add the word retain. So instead of continue to hire excellent staff, hire and retain excellent staff. So we wanted to add that. And the other 6 are more traditional 1-year types of goals. And again, I think I captured the spirit, but I'm very open to wordsmithing. Manage COVID-19 response and transition for social emotional education and safety well-being of students and staff. Just reading that, I can tell that's not quite grammatical. Continue construction efforts. Conduct a meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion audit resulting in an action plan for the district. Engage the community, student, family, staff, and development of a shared vision of best use of technology in our schools. Complete a study with community engagement to ensure the high school schedule best fits district needs and values, and put renewed effort into recruiting tuition students at OHS to capitalize on novel opportunities. Those are the goals we had discussed. It's in theory possible to add or drop goals, but hopefully we're down to the wordsmithing at this point. Any thoughts people have on this?
I just wanted to thank everyone's participation in the goals workshop. That was my first time through the process and it was great to see that. So thanks all.
I guess other than kind of cleaning up the wording on a couple of them, one thing I wasn't sure of was I mean, I'm all in favor of it, but the completing a study for the high school schedule. I'm not quite sure that we talked about going to that. Again, I'm not out of support of it, but I don't remember thing that we're going to do a study. I remember we were going to look at it and there was going to be a process, but and if we're going to do a study again, which I'm not opposed to, we're obviously going to have to talk about what it would look like.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. Study is probably a bad choice of word on my part. I think I understood it as more than a discussion, but maybe less than a complete process. I don't know what the right word for that is. And I, given what we just have said about the high school principal, this may or may not be something that's optimal, but I think for now, I personally would say keep it in there as an aspirational goal. It wouldn't be the first time we had a goal that we didn't make one year, but at least we know that we're keeping ourselves accountable and trying to come back to it next year if we don't. So
what about maybe evaluation and assessment?
Yeah, I was going to say assessment.
assess the high school schedule to ensure it best fits district needs.
Yeah, and then if we want to go a little bit further than that, I suppose we could and should, not only could, but probably should envision what the options might be. But I don't think we'd want to go beyond that next year, one, for capacity reasons, but two is also, as you pointed out, we've got some pretty significant leadership issues, uncertainty to deal with. And so I wouldn't want to go much further than that next year. As much as I don't like the schedule as it is.
Yeah, and I've been receiving feedback from a number of places about the idea of aligning with the college schedule too. That seemed to have struck a chord. So I think there's some momentum behind it. So I have assessed the high school schedule and alternatives, parentheses, with community engagement to best fit. Let me move those parentheses to the end. Assess the high school schedule and alternatives so as to best fit district needs and values, parentheses, with community engagement.
I think that's great. And then if there's a strong community push to really move on that, we can always, move further.
Yep. Number one clearly needs some wordsmithing, managing COVID response and transition. How about if we just say for social, emotional, academic, and physical well-being of students
Okay.
and staff? Continue construction efforts. I know that sounds vague, but this coming year is actually going to be a fairly big year in the sense we're going to hopefully be wrapping up with Bowman in the big general contract, and we're going to transition to lots of smaller self-managed. So that felt like about the right description. I didn't want to get into the weeds, but it's going to change its nature. So I felt like about the right description of what we're doing. It's not ending, but it's changing. Everybody happy with number 3? Engage the community, student, family, staff, and development of a shared vision of best use of technology in our schools. I'm going to take that as yes. We talked about 5. Number 6. Everybody happy with that wording? Put renewed effort into recruiting tuition students at OHS to capitalize on novel opportunities. Okay, so I would make a motion that the board adopt these 6 goals and 1 change to the ongoing goals for the academic year 21-22 for the district, as just read and edited. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, approve computation and declaration of votes. This is a formal thing related to our budget and the passing of the budget. So there's a
Yeah, there's
Motion.
actual language. And then just while Brian's pulling that up, Rachel's going to send around a DocuSign. Several documents have to be DocuSigned in this one and the next, assessment warrants and installation schedules. So if you can please sign those tonight, because we really need to get those over to the town, hopefully tomorrow. So just look for that in your email. Do you want me to hand you mine?
Oh, computation and, yeah,
Yes.
there we go. I had the other one, but then not that one. Voted that the computation and declaration of votes dated June 22nd, 2021 and attached here to be approved. Further voted that the computation and declaration of votes be entered upon the records of Regional School Unit number 26. Further voted that a certified copy of the computation and declaration of votes be sent to each of the municipal clerks of the member municipalities within the Regional School Unit 26. I'm not going to read the full computation, but it was a affirmative of 109 and a negative of 19 on June 22nd with a decision of passed. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Not that we have a lot of choice on this. All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye, and I thank our community for their continuing support of the schools. And the other motion is more directly budget related. I move that the warrant for assessment of tax and assessment schedule and notice of installments for each member municipality prepared by the treasurer for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022 be approved and be issued in form presented to this meeting, and then the treasurer be authorized and directed to deliver to each member municipality its warrant for assessment of tax and its assessment schedule and notice of installments. I don't think I have to put the note now. So is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. I would like to say our budget is done for the year, but as you all know, the state legislature is still maybe giving us more money, which maybe we can or can't spend. So we'll have to see how that evolves, but we at least know what we're planning. Okay. Approving assignment of carryover funds from FY21 to FY22. You
We
want
need to do the
Yeah, the
Milty.
Milty.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this is a case where we have the estimate, but we don't actually have the contract ready to sign. So I would make a motion to authorize the superintendent to sign the MLTI based on the fee schedule presented for an amount not to, strike the part about a fee schedule. I would like to make a motion to authorize the superintendent to sign the MLTI contract as budgeted for an amount not to exceed 100,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, so I know that's a little higher in the base amount, and I don't expect it to go that high, but since we're not meeting, I just wanted, if they come back with a price they forgot or something, give the
And just to
superintendent.
clarify, we're waiting on the state to finalize their contract with Apple still for the Milty
That's what-
contract. So,
That's why it's not finalized.
yeah.
So that's why I'm doing it not to exceed. Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, now we come to the bleacher and paving. So remember, we've discussed this as a board and agreed to both of these in principle, but tonight's the night we make a vote that makes the auditor happy. So funds unspent in FY21, we're going to authorize them to be carried over and spent in FY22 on building projects. There's the bleachers and the paving that we just more recently discussed. So somewhere there's a motion here.
And the bleacher is just an assignment of funds. The paving involves a transfer first and then an assignment. That's why that one looks a little different.
The bleachers does also include a press box, correct?
Correct. It's it's bleacher and press box, kind of an integrated unit.
Can we do this as one motion? I don't see why we couldn't. Does anybody want me to split it? Okay, I'm going to do it
Can
as
I
one
just
motion.
ask Lynn if she thinks it needs to be split for the auditor?
No, I think it's fine as long as just both pieces are there. It can be done as one.
Yeah, just be sure to include the transfer for the paving.
Okay, I make a motion that the RSU 26 school board authorizes the carry forward of 200,000 from expense accounts 1,000,000 quadruple 2690 54 5 000 320 at year end June 30th, 2021 for expenditure in the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022 for the bleacher project. And further attached to the motion, move to approve the allowable budget transfers between cost centers in order to place funds in the appropriate cost center, decreasing debt service by $166,020, increasing facilities maintenance by $166,020, and RSU 26 school board authorizes the carry forward of $77,813 from expense account 1,000,000 quadruple 2690 545 000 120 and 88,207 from expense account 1,000,000 quadruple 2690 545 000 320 at year end June 30th, 2021 for expenditure in the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022 for the paving project. Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion?
Impressive reading of the motion, Brian.
All right, we'll take a vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay. Approve new positions. I think we should probably take these one by one. We usually do that with positions. This is the one. So the first one is the one we discussed. I would make a motion to authorize the superintendent and administration to advertise a kindergarten position should we exceed the cap of 51 students expected for kindergarten in the coming year. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I guess I'd just like to add a nuance to that, because when I wrote this, Kristen and I had an in-depth discussion of their findings. So do we want to add on, or do we need to add on the option of an anticipated ad if we hit 51?
So you'd rather have an anticipated at 51 versus an actual ad at 52?
That's what I'm leaning towards.
Okay. So I would strike my motion and make a motion to authorize the superintendent to advertise an anticipated position for kindergarten teacher if the expected enrollment reaches 51 students. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I also vote aye. New position with ESSER funds. I would make a motion to authorize the advertising and hiring of interventionist ed tech 3 position at Ace Adams Elementary. Is there a second?
Second.
And I would just note that ed techs don't come to the board for further hire, so we're done with these. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. I would also authorize the superintendent to advertise and hire for a credit recovery program ed tech 2-3 at OHS based from ESSER funds. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. Subcommittee reports. I'm just going to short circuit this. Anybody want to report anything from any of the subcommittees?
I just had one question, Brian, about policy. I know there was that one policy kind of hanging out there, and then there was talk about you might try and push that through or maybe not. Did you make any decision on that?
Given I was going to just let it sit for the summer, but
Okay.
at this point, I think we're now going to call a policy meeting, hopefully a very short one, to address the remote participation. So we may as well push that one back through.
Okay.
At least get a first read for July and a second read in August.
I just wanted to give an update on facilities work because there's a lot happening that I just want to make sure everyone's aware of. The demo is well underway for all the summer work. I mean, they came in and really got busy with tearing things out and just prepping for summer. One of the first steps is a lot of examining abatement potential requirements as we dig into new areas and open up walls. And so one of the discoveries that was made is that the SREF bathroom project at ASA, they have found that they're going to have to do some abatement in each bathroom and a piping that was behind the wall. So we don't know what that change order is going to be, but we expect that that's going to be probably a sizable change order. So just FYI on that. And the other change order that we expect, well, they're going to provide us a price is for the bleachers on the visitor side. As the truck began to take shape, we saw quickly that the space left was not what we anticipated to allow for our bleachers that we had planned on the visitor side. So they need to do some more site work over there, and that's a change order that they're currently pricing. We also have done some window testing under the recommendation of the architects, and the first set of windows that were tested at ASA failed the window test, which proved the value of the window test. And so they've done a second round of testing, and the windows that are, you know, like these windows in here that open and close down at ASA, those have now passed, but the fixed windows still have to have another test. And so we are electing to do another test of the windows that passed when they come back to do the fixed window test, just to be sure, since they're having to come back anyway. And so I just want to let you know that, you know, it's in our interest. I think this is a good practice to have. It seems surprising, I think, to Bowman that we wanted to do this, but I think we received good advice to have the testing to begin with, and CHA advised us that they think it would be good to have a follow-up test, and so we're going to do that.
Can I ask a question? What are we testing? Are these the new windows,
Leak.
Bowman?
Yeah, for leaking.
Okay.
Like
So
with
like
the
a-
install, are they watertight?
So
Air
like
and
an-
water.
I thought this was a window test, like, will a kid put their arm through the window?
Sorry,
type
no,
test.
I apologize.
Okay, thanks.
And then the final thing I just wanted to update you on, I know I indicated that we had to have power outage for the transformer switchover. The ASA power outage was scheduled for this week. It was supposed to be up to 3 days. They did it in 1 day yesterday, and it's all done. So that was good news. They, you know, exceeded their, or, you know, I guess exceeded our expectations for how quickly that could be done. The OMS OHS work is planned for the week of the 12th of July, and that one they asked it or told us to expect up to 5 days because it's more involved. So my hope is that they exceed our expectations again, but you know, I won't jinx us hopefully by saying that too much. But that was a successful transition, so that was good to have that behind us. And that's all I had about facilities.
Yeah, I mean, the next 6 months are just gonna be bing, 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 bang. But yeah, so far so good. Let's see, any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? A second public comment. Would anybody like to comment? Seeing no comments, we will move on. Our next meeting, well, we just set one. It's now July 20th, I think, at 6 p.m. And that will be the last one that's purely for the audience Zoom. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Tuesday, August 10th at 6 p.m. And that physical location to be determined, but that will, barring radical changes in COVID conditions, be a hybrid meeting for both the public and, I guess it'll be hybrid for the public and not for the board at that point in time based on the new law. So any requests for information and follow-up? Lisa, I got your email from the last meeting. I appreciate that. I'll follow up with you, but I appreciate the follow-up on that. Any other requests for information and follow-up? All right, the last item is an executive session discussion, administrator evaluation. Normally at this point, I say we're not going to take any votes except to adjourn. We will take one vote on extending the superintendent contract. So I want to be transparent. That's going to occur after executive session. If you really want to watch that vote, you can hang out on the weight room while we do the evaluation. Personally, that's up to you if you want to do that. But we will be taking an actual vote other than adjournment after this executive session, since we don't have another meeting at which to take that vote. So wanted to notify you that, but unless you want to hang out for that vote, you're free to go ahead and sign off.
We need to vote to go into executive session.
Oh, we do. Sorry. Yep. I make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A, discussion of confidential personnel matters. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Are we going into the other meet?
We're going to stay here this time. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Rachel, if you want to give me host, looks like I have that already.
I
Sorry,
just
but-
wanted to, the document, there's only one document, but there's several places on the document to sign, but it's the long document because I wanted to make sure you could see what you were signing and not just have one-off pages. So when you get your DocuSign, that's what it'll be. Have a lovely evening and don't stay up too late.
Thank you, Rachel.
And
Bye.
we should stop recording. I can probably do that.